My husband of 10 years gave me an ultimatum: stand by his side as his loving wife, or get out of his life, forever. The problem, standing right next to him at the altar, was the man who had systematically destroyed my life years ago. This is the story of how I chose myself, and in doing so, brought his entire world crashing down. If you believe that self-respect is non-negotiable, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, because you won't want to miss how this ends. The scent of garlic and rosemary has always been the scent of safety. It was the smell of our home, a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago with old wooden floors that groaned like a contented old man whenever you walked across them. That evening, the aroma was particularly rich. A thick, comforting blanket in the air, mingling with the sweet acidity of a tomato sauce that had been simmering for hours. I was standing at the butcher block island, the heavy chef's knife rising and falling in a steady, hypnotic rhythm as I worked my way through a pile of red onions. The motion was automatic. A piece of muscle memory from thousands of meals cooked in this kitchen. Across from me, Jethro leaned against the counter, swirling a Cabernet in his glass, the deep red liquid catching the warm light from the pendant lamp above. A small, self-satisfied smile played on his lips. After 10 years, this was us. This was the fabric of our life, woven from countless quiet moments like this one. It was an easy, unspoken partnership. It's all coming together perfectly. You know, he said, his voice a low, happy rumble. He'd had that undercurrent of giddy excitement for weeks now. The venue sent over the final seating chart, and your mom finally decided on her dress. No more frantic late-night calls about lace. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh, as I scraped the chopped onions into a small bowl. Thank God for that. I was about to declare the entire state of Illinois a lace-free zone. I looked up at him, at the familiar lines around his eyes when he smiled. It's going to be beautiful. Honey, more than beautiful. It's going to be a testament. And that's what it was for me. Our vow renewal wasn't just a party. It was a monument to our survival, to my survival. It was a celebration of the man who had patiently, lovingly, put me back together when I was nothing but a pile of broken pieces. Because before Jethro, there was Leo. Even now, a décade later, the name tastes like ash in my mouth. Leo, with his perfect hair and a silver tongue that could talk you into setting your own house on fire just to see the pretty flames. He didn't break you with fists. He did it with words. With 1,000 tiny cuts that you barely noticed until you were bleeding out on the floor. He'd shower you with affection that felt like the warmest sunshine. And then, for no reason at all, he'd plunge you into a freezing, silent darkness. You're being too sensitive, he'd say when you cried. You're lucky I put up with your drama. He'd sigh, making you feel like a burden. By the time I finally found the strength to leave, I didn't trust my own mind. I was a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. I remember one night so clearly. About a month after I'd left him, I was huddled on the bare floor of my tiny, empty apartment, surrounded by sealed boxes that felt too heavy to open. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, a knock. It was Jethro. We were just friends then, part of a larger group. He didn't ask if he could come in, he just did. Holding a large container of chicken soup that steamed up the cold air, he didn't offer empty platitudes or tell me I was better off. He just unfolded his lanky frame onto the floor next to me, handed me a spoon, and sat in the silence with me for 2 hours while I slowly ate. He was an anchor, a quiet, unshakable anchor in the middle of my hurricane. A few weeks later, when I showed him the string of vicious, manipulative voicemails Leo had left. A darkness had crossed Jethro's face that scared me a little. He took my phone, his movements precise and angry. "He's human garbage. Sam," he'd said, his voice a low growl as he blocked the number. "A parasite in a nice suit. He gets off on your pain. I am never going to let anyone make you feel that small again. I promise." And he kept that promise. He was the architect of my reconstruction. He was my safe harbor. "Honey, I've got some amazing news." Jethro's voice snapped me back to the present. To our warm, safe kitchen. He set his wine glass down with a decisive click, his eyes shining with a boyish glee. "The final piece of the puzzle. I've officially chosen my best man." A wave of warmth washed over me. "Oh. Finally," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "It's Mark. Isn't it? Please tell me you finally asked him. He's been dropping hints for months." Mark had been Jethro's best friend since they were roommates in college. He was family. Jethro shook his head, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Nope. Mark's a groomsman." "Of course. But the best man, it's someone else. Someone I've reconnected with. And honestly, Sam, it's been incredible. We've been talking a lot. And he's been a rock for me lately. He's really matured." My curiosity was officially piqued. "A secret friend, who is it?" He took a deep, theatrical breath, puffing his chest out as if he were about to announce a winning lottery ticket. His smile was so wide, so utterly clueless. "It's Leo." The name didn't just hang in the air, it crashed. It shattered the peaceful atmosphere into a million sharp, invisible pieces. The heavy knife in my hand felt slick with onion juice. The cheerful bubbling of the sauce on the stove suddenly sounded like a timer counting down to a detonation. For a long, silent moment, my brain simply refused to compute. It was like hearing a sentence in a language I didn't speak. Leo, who? It couldn't be. I must have misheard. A laugh escaped my lips. But it was a horrifying sound. Sharp and brittle. Like a bone snapping. "That," I said, my voice tight, "is a profoundly sick joke. Jethro. Not funny." I searched his face for the punchline, for the flicker of humor that would tell me this was all a twisted prank. There was none. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated sincerity. He genuinely believed this was happy news. And that's when the warmth in the room didn't just fade, it was violently sucked out, leaving a vacuum of icy dread. I placed the knife down on the cutting board with deliberate care, my movements slow and robotic. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're not kidding," I stated, my voice a flat monotony. "No, of course not. Why would I be?" He actually looked wounded by my reaction, which only made the situation more surreal. We ran into each other at a conference in San Diego a few months ago. Got to talking. It was like no time had passed. He's in a really good place now. Sam. He's engaged. He's changed. I stared at him, the buzzing in my ears growing louder. "Changed, Jethro. Are you listening to yourself? This is the man who used to call me 10 times a night." Screaming. After I left him, the man who showed up outside my office, the man you physically had to block from coming to my door. You were there for all of it. How could you stand in this kitchen and tell me he's changed? A flicker of annoyance. The first crack in his happy facade. That was a decade ago. "Samantha." Are you going to hold on to that forever? People make mistakes. They grow. He's been incredibly supportive about all the pressure I'm under at work. He actually listens. The implication was a slap in the face. He listens. And you don't. My head was spinning. A nauseating tilt, a whirl of disbelief and betrayal. Because that's his game. Jethro. That's his brand of venom. He finds a vulnerability and makes himself indispensable. He did it to me. And now he's doing it to you. You are overreacting. He snapped. His voice sharp. The words hit me like a spray of shattered glass. You're letting your old baggage dictate everything. This is supposed to be a happy time for me. For us? This is my vow renewal too. You know, not everything is about you and your ancient history. Your baggage. My celebration. The words cleaved our shared life in two. In his mind, my trauma was an inconvenience. A dusty old suitcase I was stubbornly dragging along. Ruining his perfectly planned party. In that instant, the man I loved more than anything vanished. Replaced by a stranger wearing his face. I pushed myself away from the island. My palms flat against the cold stone. Needing to feel something solid beneath them. You called him human garbage. I said. My voice barely a whisper. You stood in my old apartment. With tears in your eyes. And you told me he was a parasite. Did you forget that, or did it just become inconvenient to remember? He had the grace to look away. To stare down into the dark red abyss of his wineglass. People say things in the heat of the moment. He mumbled. He's my friend now. I looked around our kitchen. At the photos on the fridge, us laughing in Paris. Us covered in mud after a charity run. At the mismatched coffee mugs we'd collected over the years. It was all a lie. A beautiful, elaborate stage set for a play whose leading man had just walked off and joined the villain. The architect of my reconstruction had just handed the demolition crew a wrecking ball. My heart didn't just break. It felt like it had been turned to stone in my chest. I met his gaze. My own eyes cold and clear. The panic was gone. Replaced by a terrifying, absolute certainty. If he is standing up at that altar, I said, my voice level and devoid of any emotion at all, then I won't be. You have to choose. Jethro. He stared at me. His jaw tight with anger and disbelief. He opened his mouth. A protest already forming on his lips. But then he shut it. He turned his back on me completely. Gripping the edge of the counter so hard his knuckles went white. And stared out the window into the glittering, indifferent lights of the Chicago skyline. He didn't have to say a word. His silence was the choice. His silence was an answer more brutal than any word he could have spoken. It was a physical presence in the room. A heavy, suffocating thing that settled over the scent of garlic and the ruined dinner. I watched the rigid line of his shoulders. The way he gripped the countertop as if it were the only thing holding him upright. He was choosing. In his stillness, he was actively choosing a memory. A ghost. Over the living, breathing woman who had built a life with him. The sauce on the stove continued to bubble. An oblivious, cheerful sound in the tomb our kitchen had become. I turned off the burner. The click of the knob echoing loudly in the quiet. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of the kitchen. My footsteps unnaturally loud on the creaking wooden floors, and went into our bedroom, closing the door behind me. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Jethro operated under the silent, infuriating assumption that if he ignored the problem, it would simply vanish. He wanted me to just get over it. To wake up one morning and decide that my sanity was a small price to pay for his comfort. He'd wake up, get dressed, and leave for work with a clipped, "Have a good day," directed at the wall. He'd come home and immediately turn on the television, filling the apartment with the noise of sitcoms and sports. A barricade of sound to keep the silence at bay. He made coffee for one. He did his laundry and left mine in the hamper. We were two ghosts haunting the same space, moving around each other with a careful, practiced choreography. The shared bed between us at night feeling as wide and cold as a frozen lake. Every polite, empty gesture was a new cut. He wasn't fighting with me, he was erasing me. He was treating my ultimatum not as a desperate plea to be seen, but as a childish tantrum that would eventually pass. And with every passing hour, the love I had for him, the deep, foundational love that had defined my entire adult life, was curdling into something else. Something cold and hard and unrecognizable. On the third day of this suffocating quiet, I couldn't bear it anymore. I took my phone and walked out onto our small balcony. The cold Chicago air, a welcome shock to my system. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed the call button next to Chloe's name. She was my person. My friend since college. The one who had seen me through the darkest days of Leo and celebrated the brightest days with Jethro. She answered on the second ring. "Hey. I was just thinking about you. How's the vow renewal planning going?" Her voice was a cheerful, painful reminder of the world that had existed just 72 hours ago. Tears I didn't even know I was holding back started to stream down my face, hot against my cold skin. I couldn't speak. I just made a choked, gasping sound. Samantha, what's wrong? Are you okay?" The cheer was gone, replaced by sharp concern. I finally found my voice, but it was a broken, reedy thing. "He chose a best man," I whispered. "Oh, thank God." He finally asked Mark. No. I cut her off. "It's not Mark." I took a ragged breath. "Chloe. He chose Leo." There was complete silence on the other end of the line. For a full 10 seconds. I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her inhale sharply. "You're kidding me," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "You are lying to me right now. Samantha Miller. Tell me you're lying." "I wish I was," I sobbed. The story tumbling out of me in a torrent of pain and disbelief, the announcement, his justification, the gaslighting, my ultimatum, the crushing silence. When I finished, Chloe didn't offer sympathy. She offered rage. A beautiful, righteous fury on my behalf that felt like the first breath of clean air I'd had in days. "That man is not just an asshole. He is a coward of the highest order," she seethed. "This isn't you overreacting. Sam, this isn't you dragging up the past. This is him taking the most profound trauma of your life, the very thing that led you to him in the first place, and spitting on it. It is an unforgivable insult. What in God's name is he thinking?" "He thinks Leo has changed," I said, the words tasting like poison. "I don't give a damn if Leo has started a charity for orphaned puppies and spends his weekends building houses for the poor. It doesn't matter. What matters is what he did to you. And Jethro knows. He had a front row seat. For him to do this, it's a betrayal I can't even wrap my head around." Her anger was a lifeline, pulling me from the sea of self-doubt he had tried to drown me in. I wasn't crazy. My pain was real. That night, armed with Chloe's validation, I decided to try one last time. For the 10 years. For the man he used to be. I found him in the living room, staring blankly at some basketball game. I turned off the television. "We need to talk," I said, my voice quiet. He sighed. A long, martyred sound. "Samantha, if this is about Leo again, this is about us," I interrupted. "Jethro, please, look at me." He reluctantly turned his head. "Do you remember the night you found me on my apartment floor? Do you remember the panic attacks I used to have if a car that looked like his drove down my street? You held my hand through all of it. You were the one who told me I deserved to feel safe. How can that man be gone? Where did he go?" I was appealing to our shared history, to the very foundation of our love. I thought if I could just make him remember, he would snap out of it. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a memory. Maybe even a sliver of guilt. But it was extinguished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, hard defensiveness. "I'm still that man," he said, his voice rising. "But I'm also a man who believes in second chances. Something you clearly don't. You're so stuck in the past, you can't see the present. Leo has been a better friend to me in the last 3 months than some people have been in years. He doesn't judge me. He supports me." He stood up, towering over me. "I am not going to ruin a real friendship just because you can't let go of a grudge. You are being selfish. You are trying to sabotage my happiness, to make my vow renewal all about you. I won't let you do it." It was the final, fatal blow. He wasn't just dismissing my pain anymore. He was accusing me of malice. He had twisted my desperation to protect myself into an act of selfish destruction. The man I married was well and truly gone. I had been grieving his absence. But this was worse. This was an exorcism. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there as the last vestiges of my love for him withered and died. I felt it leave my body. A great, hollow emptiness taking its place. The fight was over. I had lost. And in losing, I had finally understood. Staying with him wouldn't just be an insult to my past self, it would be the complete and utter annihilation of my future. I slept on the couch that night. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. A strange, cold clarity in my mind. The grief was still there. A heavy stone in my gut. But it was now surrounded by a hard shell of resolve. I made 2 phone calls from the quiet of the living room. The first was to the top-rated divorce attorney in Chicago. The second was to a moving company. By the time Jethro came out of the bedroom, I was already in the study, pulling our photo albums off the shelves. He stopped in the doorway, a coffee mug halfway to his lips. "What are you doing?" "I'm sorting," I said. My voice even. I didn't look at him. I just kept placing photos into 2 piles, mine and ours. The process was methodical, almost surgical. Every object was a memory I had to dissect. A kitschy snow globe from our first vacation together, the dried corsage from our wedding, the concert tickets from our 3rd date. I packed my clothes, my books, the half of the kitchenware that was mine from before we met. The sound of the packing tape gun, a loud, ugly zipping noise, was the only sound in the apartment for hours. It was the sound of a life being systematically dismantled. He came home that evening to a living room filled with cardboard boxes, each one labeled in my neat, black script. He stood in the doorway, his briefcase in hand. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked truly shocked. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He had genuinely believed I would break. He had never imagined I would actually leave. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a choked whisper. "This is me choosing I said, taping another box shut. His shock curdled into a dark, narcissistic rage. You're insane, he spat, throwing his briefcase onto a chair. You're actually going to throw away 10 years of marriage over this. Over a single wedding guest. You are unbelievable. You are the most selfish person I have ever met. I finally stood up and faced him. The hollow space inside me had been filled, not with love, but with a cold, hard strength I didn't know I possessed. The 10 years were thrown away when you decided that my trauma was an inconvenience, I said, my voice as calm and steady as a frozen river. They were over when you stood in our kitchen and prioritized the feelings of my abuser over the safety of your wife. This isn't about a wedding guest, Jethro. It's about respect. And you have shown me I have none left here. The movers came the next day. A few weeks later, I was in a small, temporary furnished apartment across town. A sterile place that smelled of cleaning products and had no memories. I was numb, just going through the motions of existence. Then, one afternoon, I checked the mail. Tucked between a gas bill and some junk mail was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The calligraphy was elegant. The cardstock heavy and expensive. It was an invitation to the wedding of Jethro and myself. It was our vow renewal invitation. He had actually sent it. My hands trembled as I read the name on the envelope. The final, deliberate twist of the knife. It wasn't addressed to Mrs. Samantha Williams or even Samantha and guest. It just said, Miss Samantha Miller. My maiden name, a formal, public demotion. A cold, clear message that I had been officially erased. I sank onto the cheap rental couch. The invitation clutched in my hand. He didn't just want me to be gone. He wanted me to witness what I had lost. To sit in the audience and watch him celebrate the new life he was building on the wreckage of ours. He wanted to humiliate me. I stared at the elegant script. At my old name. And the numbness inside me finally began to recede. It was replaced by something else. Something hot and sharp and fiery. It wasn't grief. It was rage. And in the ashes of my broken heart, a plan began to form. That thick, cream-colored cardstock felt heavier than a tombstone in my hand. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a gauntlet thrown down. A final act of psychological warfare disguised in elegant calligraphy. He wanted me to be a spectator to my own erasure. He wanted me to sit quietly in a back pew and watch him stand where we once stood. Replacing me not with another woman, but with the ghost of the man who had tried to destroy me. He didn't want to just win, he wanted to see me broken by his victory. I sank onto the soulless rental couch, the stiff fabric scratching against my skin, and stared at my old name. Miss Samantha Miller. A stranger. A footnote. The rage that had been a slow, simmering ember in the pit of my stomach for weeks finally roared into an inferno. It burned away the numbness, the grief, the suffocating cloak of victimhood, and in its place, a cold, diamant-hard resolve formed. Fine. Jethro, you want a show? I'll give you a performance you'll never forget. The night of the vow renewal, I didn't prepare for a funeral. I prepared for battle. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my sterile apartment bedroom. The invitation propped up on the dresser like a target. I had spent a week's worth of my new, tighter budget on a dress, a floor-length sheath of deep, emerald green silk that clung to my body in a way that was both elegant and unapologetic. It wasn't a color of mourning. It was the color of life, of venom, of money. It was the color of rebirth. I spent an hour on my makeup, Not to hide, but to build a mask of serene indifference, a smoky eye that suggested mystery. Not tears, a dark red lipstick that was a slash of defiance. I twisted my hair up into a severe, élégant chignon. Every strand lacquered into place. When I was done, the woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. She was harder, colder, but she was unbroken. She was a warrior. I took a cab to the venue. A grand old hotel ballroom downtown with soaring ceilings and chandeliers that dripped crystals like frozen tears. As I stepped out onto the curb, the cold night air bit at my bare shoulders. I walked through the ornate lobby, my heels clicking a sharp, deliberate rhythm on the marble floor. I could feel the eyes on me before I even entered the ballroom. When I stepped through the grand double doors, a wave of whispers rippled through the assembled guests. I saw familiar faces, our friends, his colleagues, his my own distant relatives, their expressions a mixture of shock, pity, and morbid curiosity. I was the spectacle, the ghost at the feast. I didn't flinch. I held my head high, fixed a small, polite smile on my red lips, and moved through the room as if I belonged there, nodding at the people I knew, ignoring the ones who looked away too quickly. I found a seat at a table in the far back corner, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement of white lilies whose cloying, funereal scent filled the air. From there, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the altar, and then the ceremony began. Watching Jethro walk down the aisle, beaming, felt like watching a stranger in a home movie of my life. But the true out-of-body experience came when Leo walked out. He looked handsome, confident, his smile as easy and practiced as ever. He clapped Jethro on the shoulder, and they stood side by side. Two soldiers in a war I was never meant to understand. The air left my lungs. It was a grotesque tableau vivant of my past and present colliding. The monster and the man who was supposed to protect me from him, united. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a profound, chilling detachment. As if I were a scientist observing a particularly ugly species in its natural habitat. I watched them exchange their vows, our vows, on the same words we had spoken 10 years ago, and my heart didn't break. It didn't have to. It was already gone. The reception was a cacophony of forced cheerfulness. I nursed a single glass of champagne, making it last. A silent sentinel at my lonely table. I watched them have their first dance. I watched his mother, a woman who once called me her daughter, hug him tightly, her eyes flicking over to my corner with a look of cold disapproval. Then came the speeches. Mark, the friend who should have been best man, gave a short, stilted toast that was painfully generic. And then, Leo took the microphone. A hush fell over the room. He commanded attention. He always had. He started with a charming, self-deprecating joke about how unlikely it was for two guys to lose touch and then find their way back to each other. He was smooth, polished, a predator in a tuxedo. You know, he said, raising his glass to Jethro. It takes a special kind of man to look past old disagreements and see the person someone has become. It takes a big heart. And Jethro, my friend, you have the biggest heart of anyone I know. He paused, letting his eyes sweep the room. And for a fraction of a second, they met mine. It was intentional. You believe in forgiveness. You believe in second chances. You don't let bitterness or the past hold you back. And that's why you're one of the best men I've ever known. The applause was thunderous. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. a public condemnation disguised as a compliment. He had painted me as the bitter, unforgiving shrew, and Jethro as the magnanimous saint, all without ever saying my name. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the table. I had to get out of there. But as I stood to leave, a hand closed around my arm. It was Jethro. His face was flushed with champagne and emotion, his eyes glassy. "Sam, don't go." He slurred slightly. "I saw you sitting back here all alone. I miss you. I'm happy for you." "Jethro," I said, my voice devoid of all inflection. It was a beautiful ceremony. Was it he looked genuinely desperate? He pulled me aside, away from the prying eyes near the dance floor. "This whole night, it feels wrong without you. I hate this. I hate that you're looking at me like I'm a stranger." His eyes filled with tears. And for a horrifying moment, he looked like the man I had married. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Can't we just let it go just for tonight? Just dance with me once. For me." And there it was. The trigger, the ultimate, breathtaking selfishness of his request. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He hadn't admitted he was wrong. He just wanted me to erase my own pain. To perform the role of the happy, supportive ex-wife to soothe his own discomfort. He wanted me to dance on the grave of our marriage to make him feel better. I looked at him, at his tear-streaked face, and the last flicker of warmth I might have had for him was extinguished forever. "No, Jethro," I said, my voice quiet but as unyielding as steel. "Healing is not a switch you can flip for your convenience. To ask me to stand here and pretend that my heart isn't shattered. To ask me to smile and applaud the man who shattered it, standing next to the man who was supposed to protect me, that isn't just thoughtless. It's cruel. It's monstrous." His face crumpled. He started to sob. Real, gulping sobs. And before I could react, he pulled me into a hug. His body shook against mine. His tuxedo jacket smelled of champagne and another woman's perfume. I stood rigid in his arms. My own body, a statue of ice. This wasn't a hug of reconciliation. It was the desperate clutch of a drowning man trying to pull his rescuer back under with him. It was a performance of sorrow for an audience of one. I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Gently, but firmly, I pushed him away. His hands fell to his sides, and he looked at me. "Lost. I wish you a happy life." "Jethro," I said. It wasn't a lie. I truly hoped he would find some sort of happiness. Far away from me. I turned without another word and walked away. I didn't run. I walked. My head held high. Through the crowded ballroom. Past the towering, untouched wedding cake. And out the grand doors into the cold, clean night air. I didn't look back. Back in my apartment. The emerald dress felt like a costume I couldn't wait to shed. I stripped it off and left it in a heap on the floor. I washed the warrior paint from my face, scrubbing until my skin was raw and clean. Then, wrapped in an old, soft robe, I sat down at my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark room, illuminating my face. My fingers found the keyboard. I didn't have to think. The words were already there, etched into my heart. I started to type. I told the whole story. I started with the garlic and rosemary, with the love and safety I thought I had. I wrote about Leo, not in anger, but with a chilling, factual clarity about the abuse. I wrote about Jethro's promise, his vow to protect me, and then I wrote about his betrayal, I laid it all out. Piece by painful piece. I didn't yell. I didn't name-call. I just presented the evidence. Finally, I got to the end. My fingers hovered over the keys. And I typed the final, devastating paragraph. But the cruelest irony, the part that will haunt me forever, is not just that he chose my abuser to be his best man. It's that he did so forgetting the promise he made to me all those years ago in a dark, empty apartment. He forgot the man he used to be. The man who once held me while I cried and, with righteous fury in his eyes, called that very same person human garbage. I read it over once. It was all there. My truth. My story. My reclamation. My cursor blinked over the blue post button. For a heartbeat. He hesitated. This was the point of no return. This was an act of detonation. A small part of me, the ghost of the woman who had loved him, whispered to stop. But the woman I was now, the one forged in the fire of his betrayal, was stronger. I took a deep, steadying breath. And I clicked. The screen refreshed. A small, innocuous notification appeared at the top of the page. Your post has been shared. The confirmation message, your post has been shared, glowed on the laptop screen with a quiet, digital finality. For a long moment, I just stared at it, my hand still resting on the trackpad. The room was utterly silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchenette. I had just launched a nuclear warhead into the heart of my old life, and all it made was a single, silent click. There was no thunderclap, no tremor in the earth. Just me. The glow of the screen, and the sudden, profound quiet of the aftermath. I took a breath, then another, feeling the air fill my lungs. A strange sense of calm washing over me. I had done it. I had taken back the narrative. Whatever happened next, it would happen on my terms. Then, my phone, which had been lying screen down on the coffee table, buzzed once. A short, sharp vibration against the wood. I watched it, my heart starting a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. A few seconds later, it buzzed again, then a third time. In rapid succession, the screen lit up, casting a pale blue light on the ceiling, a Facebook notification. Then a text message preview slid down from the top of the screen. Then another. It was like the first few drops of rain before a deluge. Within a minute, the phone was in a state of constant, frantic vibration. A trapped, angry insect buzzing against the table. The pings and chimes and alerts came so fast they blurred into a single, continuous stream of digital noise. The storm had broken. I reached for the phone with a steady hand. My own calmness, a strange counterpoint to the chaos erupting in the small device. I unlocked the screen. It was a waterfall of reaction. The comments on my post were flooding in, a torrent of shock and outrage. Oh my God. Sam. I am so sorry this happened to you. Jethro. What the hell is wrong with you? I thought you were a better man than this. Leo is and always has been a snake. I can't believe you let him back into your life. Mutual friends. His colleagues. My family members. It was an instantaneous, brutal public trial. And the verdict was unanimous. Then came the private messages. Dozens of them. Some were from friends. Offering support. Asking if I was okay. But it was the messages from Jethro that I was waiting for. They began a minute after the first public comment appeared. They were an entire psychological arc. A man completely unraveling in real time. typed out in angry. The spirited block letters. The first one was pure. Incandescent raw. How dare you? You ruined my wedding night. You are a vindictive, horrible person. I read it and felt nothing. I imagined him typing it. His face red, his knuckles white. Champagne, courage, turning to impotent fury. The second message, which came 5 minutes later, was laced with panic. The reality of the social fallout was beginning to set in. My phone is blowing up. My mother is crying. What did you do? Everyone is looking at me. You did this to me on purpose to humiliate me. Yes. I thought. A cold, clear voice in my head. I did. You wanted me to be a spectator to my own humiliation. I simply returned the favor. The third message, 10 minutes after that, was the beginning of the pathetic, pleading stage. Sam, please, take it down. I'm begging you. We can talk about this. I'll do anything. Please. You're destroying my life. I put the phone back down on the table. Screen down. I didn't need to read anymore. I had seen everything I needed to see. The rage. The panic. The begging. It was never about me. It was never about remorse for what he'd done. It was only ever about him. His reputation. His comfort. He wasn't sorry for the betrayal. He was sorry he got caught. My phone started ringing. The screen flashing with Chloe's name. I let the digital storm rage on the coffee table and picked up the call, retreating to the relative quiet of the bedroom. Okay. Chloe's voice was a shot of adrenaline, a mixture of awe and fury. I'm in a cab. I just left. The place is a goddamn war zone. What happened? I asked, sinking onto the edge of the bed. What do you think happened? She said, her voice crackling with energy. Your post went live right as the DJ started playing some awful Bruno Mars song. At first, just a few people were on their phones, then a few more. You could literally watch it spread across the room in a wave. The whispers started. Then people started huddling in little groups, showing each other their screens. The music just sort of fizzled out. Someone showed Jethro's mother the post, and she looked like she was going to faint. The bride god. I can't even call her that, just stood there, her face white as a sheet. She took a breath. Jethro was running around, trying to do damage control, grabbing people's arms, his face all red and sweaty. It was pathetic. Leo just vanished. I swear to God. 1 minute he was there, and the next he was gone. People started leaving, not even making excuses, just grabbing their coats and walking out. I saw your cousin walk right up to Jethro, say something that made him flinch. And then she left too. It wasn't a party anymore. It was the aftermath of a car crash. I listened. A strange, quiet vindication settling in my bones. It wasn't glee. It was the solemn, satisfying feeling of justice, of a great imbalance in the universe finally being set right. Good, I said. The word a quiet exhalation. Good, Chloe laughed. A sharp, fierce sound. It was biblical. I'll be at your place in 10 minutes with a bottle of very expensive wine and 2 tubs of ice cream. When she arrived, I finally turned my phone off. The sudden, absolute silence was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I had said my piece. The story was out in the world. No longer a secret poison I had to carry alone. The conversation, for me, was over. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal paperwork and logistical arrangements. I signed the divorce papers in my lawyer's sterile, quiet office. My hand didn't tremble as I wrote my name, Samantha Miller, on the final page. It felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Like signing the deed to a property I had just reclaimed myself. Jethro, true to form, didn't fight it. He agreed to everything. He just wanted it to be over. The public shaming had done its work. He still tried to reach me. Of course. After a week of silence from my end, his frantic texts, now sent from a new number, started again. They were different now. The anger was gone, replaced by a cloying, desperate performance of remorse. I get it now. I was a fool. I should have listened to you. I was so caught up in my own ego. Leo is out of my life. I told him I never want to see him again. It's you I care about. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Isn't 10 years of love worth more than one mistake? I read them, not with anger or pity, but with a kind of clinical detachment. It was all so predictable. His regret was a direct consequence of his public humiliation, not of his private betrayal. He wasn't mourning the loss of me. He was mourning the loss of his reputation. He wasn't a changed man. He was just a man who had finally run out of options. One morning, several weeks later, I woke up before my alarm. The first pale, gray light of dawn was filtering through the blinds of my new apartment. This one wasn't a temporary rental. It was mine. A small, one-bedroom place with a view of the lake that I had found and leased all on my own. It was still mostly empty, but it felt more like a home than the place I had shared with Jethro ever had. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky slowly transform from a deep, bruised purple to a soft, hopeful pink. The distant sounds of the city waking up a far-off siren. The rumble of the L train were the sounds of life, of a world moving forward. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt like I was moving with it. A profound sense of peace settled over me. So deep and complete it felt like I could float on it. The heavy, ever-present stone of grief and anxiety that had been lodged in my chest for months was just gone. I felt light. I felt clean. I felt free. I sipped my coffee, the warmth spreading through my hands, and watched the sun finally break over the horizon, painting the calm surface of Lake Michigan in shimmering gold. As if on cue, my phone, which I had finally turned back on, buzzed on the counter beside me. A message from an unknown number. I knew who it was. My first instinct was to ignore it, but I felt a pull of finality. I picked it up. I know you hate me. The message read. And you have every right to, but I have to ask one last time. What can I do to fix this? I looked at the words on the screen, and I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No lingering attachment. It was like reading a message from a stranger about a life that belonged to someone else. The woman who would have agonized over that question, the woman who would have seen a sliver of hope in his plea, was gone. He had killed her. And in her place, a new woman had been born. With a calm, steady thumb, I held down on his message. A small menu popped up. I tapped delete. Then I went to the contact information and tapped the button that said, block this caller. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure? I smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I looked out the window at the new day. At the bright, limitless horizon. I'm sure. I whispered to myself. I put the phone down, took another sip of my coffee, and watched the sun climb higher into the sky. I didn't know what my future held. I didn't have a plan. But for the first time in a very long time, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was going to be okay. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.